Yeah, so starting again, I welcome you all to the final round of War of Worlds organized by In Light of Law, in which we have our sponsors naming Pahuja Law Academy and with our knowledge partner, Indus School of Jurisprudence. In panel, we have our respected Sanjay sir. And then we have, as a second panelist, we have Gimhan Sooriyabandara sir from Sri Lanka. We are extremely honored to have you both in our panel today. The two teams who have qualified for the final is 205 and 206. We also congratulate them. And by this, going ahead, I want to welcome the first speaker from 205.
Am I audible to everyone?
Yes, you are clearly audible.
Can I see the clock on the screen, please, if that's possible? Or
yeah, sure. Just a moment.
thank you so much, organizing team. So again, very warm greetings to all the respected dignitaries. I cannot stress enough how much of a pleasure it is for me to argue before such an honorable and august bench. I hope all of us are doing well. On the proposition provided, I like to vouch my opinion in favor of the motion purely under Rawls' veil of ignorance. I shall be relying on a six-fold argumentation to support my cause. First one being improvement in legal systems. Respectable judges, as far as India is considered, sex work is an age-old institution, as highlighted in the judgment of Gaurav Jain versus Union of India. The current law that is applicable to the work of sex is only Immoral Trafficking Act, which itself is a fundamentally flawed law with a very problematic application. Thus, honorable judges, it is imperative to lay out a new law legalizing the work which cater to all the requisites and does not make it a case of ship of thesis. A legislation of legalizing the work shall only promote the right to equality, which is seen as a magnificent cornerstone of the Indian democracy in the judgment of Indra Swani versus Union of India, delivered by the Honorable Supreme Court itself. Further, it is imperative to note that criminalizing sex work immaculately violates the freedom of trade to every citizen, which is enshrined under Article 19, subclause G of the Constitution, as it cannot be construed as a reasonable restriction. Respectable judges, it was noted that occupation is an activity which defines the means of livelihood of a citizen in the judgment of TMA Pai Foundation versus State of Karnataka by the Honorable Apex Court of India. And reasonable restrictions must not affect the livelihood of the citizens. Thus, quantifying sex work as a crime would be a gross and flagrant violation of the Constitution itself. Further, respectable judges, on a global perspective, the European Court of Human Rights, ECHR, has also considered that sex work must be treated as a just and respectable profession in their 2018 ruling. Also, Article 23 of the UDHR, that is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, guarantees the right to work to free choice of employment, while Article 25 of the same supplements this by guaranteeing that everyone has a right to standard of living adequate for the health and well-being of themselves. Thus, such a legalization will only conform more to these principles. My second argument is that it will provide better working conditions for the sex workers and lead to inclusion of them under the ambit of labor laws. The Supreme Court, in the judgment of Bachpan Bachao Andolan versus Union of India, has clearly elucidated that by legalizing sex work, government can effectively monitor the trade, rehabilitate, and provide medical aid to those involved. Further, respectable judges, I like to highlight that it inherently is the constitutional obligation of the state itself to make policies to prevent maltreatment of citizens of India as workers in accordance with Article 39E of the Constitution. My third point is medical improvement of the current standards. Such a decision will improve the medical conditions of the sex workers by bringing legislations where use of contraceptives can be made necessary to avoid spread of STDs. A study in the United States of America highlighted that legalizing this trade would at least decrease 25,000 rapes every year. A substantial dip in abduction for sexual exploitation was also seen in New Zealand after the change. My upcoming argument is the relevance to the movie industry. It is imperative to notice that even the movie industry includes an ambit of exhibitism and includes certain form of sex. And therein, actresses and actors are merely considered as artists, and the art is considered separate from them. A similar understanding is required for sex workers as well. Why do we have a distinction for them and for people on the big cinema? Thus, legalizing of this act will have a fallen effect on inclusion of sex workers in the society and will lead to social development of them. Lastly, I'd like to take us back to our independence, to 15th of August, the words of Honorable Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru. Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru said, "When the world sleeps, India awake towards freedom and light." These were the honorable words on which our independence was laid upon. However, respectable judges, I am deeply saddened to highlight the fact that we as a society are still asleep when it comes to providing equality and equity for every sector of the society. With that, I'd like to rest my arguments.
Thank you, speaker, for your wonderful speech. May we please have the second speaker from 206?
Am I audible and visible?
Yes, you are.
Shall I begin?
Yes.
A very good afternoon, all. I, Wow 206, will be going to speak against the motion. If we can abolish slavery, then why can't we abolish prostitution? As prostitution is the enslavement of women and children to work in the sex trade. You might have heard recent case about the Bully Buy app. If prostitution would have been legalized, then this case would be completely normal. First of all, women in a position to sell their body and have their livelihood is nothing but the failure of the system. It is a collective failure of the government from 47 till now. And as per my understanding, prostitution contributes to the objectification of women. Just because someone pays does not erase the qualification of what we consider sexual violence, domestic violence, and rape. Because most of these workers don't have a choice on whom they're coupled with, and a lot of them are stuck in this situation without any help. So even though it is a prostitute, it is still a rape. Legalization prostitution legitimizes the sale and use of humans and make people think it is a normal job. This tells society that even though someone is constantly being harmed, it is acceptable because it is a job. This is actually a trade of flesh. It might be benefit for the pimps and the facilitators, but not for the victims. You know, prostitution is not the same as service industry, where you are paid for a skill. Being a woman is a state of being and not a skill that can be paid for. And of course, legalization does not mean that sex worker will be protected under labor law. Why? Because legalization of prostitution goes against the International Labour Organization definition of decent work, and it is considered as selling sex under distress. Global statistics proves that countries that have legalized prostitution, Thailand, for example, have witnessed that increase in the sex trade and are promoted as sex tourism destination. You know, international tourists get drawn to our country because of the Eastern mysticism, or say moksha. And if we legalize prostitution, we will be seen as a tourist destination for purchasing cheap sex. We should look at the real picture. What various studies have shown that legalizing prostitution have not really helped to solve the problem. On the contrary, putting aside the moral damage that I have mentioned, it is observed that there was a sharp increase in human trafficking, especially child trafficking. On health point of view, number of cases related to STD have increased by legalizing. Also, if government will legalize brothels like Europe did, you might see brothels in villages just like liquor shops. And I believe the society can never accept a brothel to be open in the neighborhood. See, we need to understand, just like my worthy opponent have mentioned, the faults in the law, present law. The difference is we need decriminalization. There's a difference between decriminalization and legalization. What is the need of the hour is decriminalization, be it Independent Commission on AIDS of Asia, the UN, Global Commission on HIV, they all have recommended the decriminalization of sex work. because the way sex workers are treated by the law enforcement agencies during and after the raid or rescue operation is torturous. They should not be arrested, as many of them are the victims. The objective of improving the condition of their life, giving them access to health, and them being able to set the terms and condition of their life will be served by decriminalization, and legalization will actually again disempower them. How? Let me explain this a bit. What legalization will do, that the government will give license to the brothels, and who will regulate whether you have a license or not? The same agencies which I have mentioned. There will be a cycle of license raj for this trade of flesh, and the agencies will eventually harass the victims and actually go counterproductive of what the government aim to achieve. If the government really want to take a step, first decriminalize this and can provide rehabilitation sex worker, educate them, give them job, bring them in the mainstream. But legalization is not the solution. So in the end, I would like to ask a question from every single present person here, that will India allow straight run brothels in a country where women are worshipped as goddess? Thank you.
Thank you, speaker, for your wonderful speech. May we please have the first speaker from team 206?
Am I audible and visible?
Yes, you are both.
Oh, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I will be speaking for the motion. Prostitution is the oldest profession. In India, it was practiced extensively so much that even the Kautilya mentioned it in his Arthashastra. And I am personally a big follower of him. Moreover, while I was researching for this topic, I was quite surprised and I was quite happy to know that one of the 18 types of soils that is collected during Durga Puja, especially in Bengal, for making goddess Durga idol, and it is incomplete without the soil from the prostitute's door. This kind of thanksgiving to the prostitute who consumes the poison of the society. So why shouldn't government legalize it and recognize this sector in which, according to official data, 6 lakhs women are indulged, and unofficially it is said to be around 50 or 60 lakhs, most probably. How could government ignore them? Even the Supreme Court to the center has advised that if you can't curb prostitution, then why can't you legalize it? Now let's see the impact of COVID on these prostitution and all their lives. COVID-19 has impacted all of us badly, and by different policies, government tried to support every major sector. But what about sex workers? COVID-19 pandemic impacted their lives too. So, if we legalize them, then it will be easy for the agencies to support them, to help them. You know, this sector is indirectly illegal in our country and in majority of all our neighboring countries generally, and thereby we can't do anything for the health of the prostitutes. Even if a NGO is willing to provide support to a prostitute who lives in brothel, then they can't do it, as that too will be considered criminal under Immoral Traffic Prevention Act, and also known as Sita Act. Also, Sita has mostly led to the victims being punished instead of perpetrators. In most of the leading countries like Germany, Switzerland, Austria, Greece, Turkey, Netherlands, and many more, the prostitution is legal. If we just take the example of Germany, their prostitution is legalized, and thereby they have made rules for it. Just like they have fixed the age of prostitutes and many other rules for regulating their rights and protecting their rights. The positive changes which can we can brought in the society and in India after legalizing can be listed as: number one, access to justice. Legalization will get access to justice to the victims. Second, end of middlemen. The middlemen exploits the prostitution. They do not let the sex workers get much help from the police because due to lack of documentation and exploitation is doubled. Third, licensing of brothels. If the government does it legalize, the sex workers will have their ID card registered with them so that documentation can be done with the government. Fourth, setting of legalized organization for sex workers to work. The organization for sex workers made by the government will inform that how many workers or sex workers are working with them. and then they will be given all the facilities that and rights that they have defined as basic working hours. Fifth, health clearance and checking and spread of HIV. The spread of HIV would decrease with the help of proper monthly health inspection of sex workers. HIV, which is now presently in quite control in India, at one time was spread so highly that everyone was scared of it. But we never know, as we have seen the COVID, that a pandemic can come anytime. We are not sure about it. So it's better to take precautions for it. Sixth, this method can facilitate the eradication of sex racket operation, hidden and street prostitution, abuse of prostitute, etc. There shall be protection house established for these prostitutes who have their livelihood or those who were forced into prostitution. It shall also formulate guidelines regarding the age of the prostitute database on client adequate medical facilities to the prostitution. By this method, the prostitute can be given the right to education, right to health, right to education for their children, which we have already seen that they are exploited. In the last, I would just like to conclude that prostitution is far more complex than we see it, and it's much more deeper and deeper, and it's get complex, and it's quite difficult for them to live their life. We in society, we have generally set them aside, but we can't ignore them. They are part of our society and deserve the same right as we deserve. Thank you.
Thank you, speaker, for your wonderful speech. May we please call the second speaker from Team 205?
Oh, yes, I'm here. Good afternoon, everyone. I will be advancing two arguments to establish the opposition's case.
Just a second, speaker.
I'm sorry. What?
Just speakers, yeah, your voice is a little bit cracking. Can you just say a sentence so that we can check if you're audible directly?
Yeah, am I audible now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, it's better now.
Okay, great. So let's start again. Good afternoon, everyone. I will be advancing two arguments to establish the opposition's case. My first argument is about how legalizing prostitution will lead to more human trafficking and how legalization of prostitution will lead to more prostitution. So moving on to my first argument, in the growing support for the legalization of prostitution that we can see, critics like me who oppose this motion are concerned about public's lack of understanding of the actual effects of legalization. Legalization of the sex industry also converts brothels, sex clubs, and other sites of prostitution activities into legitimate venues where commercial sexual acts are allowed to flourish legally with few restraints. If we legalize prostitution in India, our country will become a sex haven if we legalize. Global data shows that countries that have legalized prostitution, such as Thailand, have seen a considerable growth in sex trade and are marketed as sex tourism destinations. International visitors will be drawn to our country. International visitors will be drawn to our country as it will become a tourist destination for getting cheap sex. The opposition believes that in calling for legalization of prostitution, they dignify and professionalize the women in prostitution. But dignifying prostitution as work doesn't dignify the women. It simply dignifies the sex industry. People don't realize that legalization means legalization of the whole sex industry, not just the women in it. The Honorable High Court of Allahabad also held that prostitution must not be sanctioned as a suitable source of income, being a legal encouragement for women trafficking. The Supreme Court of India stated that under the Constitution, no one has claimed the right to subsistence by pursuing an indecorous employment like prostitution. Studies show that most female sex workers enter prostitution out of necessity, not personal choice. We might wonder whether continued criminalization that keep workers trapped in this prostitution is justifiable, when we could instead focus on helping sex workers escape prostitution. Most women in prostitution did not make a rational choice to enter prostitution from among a range of other options. Hence, legalization of prostitution will be a gift to pimps, traffickers, and the sex industry. Moving on to my second argument, how legalization of prostitution will lead to more prostitution and child prostitution. Legalization of prostitution will encourage men to buy women for sex in a wider and more permissible range of socially acceptable things. With the advent of legalization in countries that we have that have legalized the sex industry, many men who previously would not have risked buying women for sex now see prostitution as acceptable. When legal barriers disappear, so do the social and ethical barriers to treating women as sexual merchandise. Legalization of prostitution sends the message to new generations of men and boys that women are sexual commodities and that prostitution is harmless fun. Also, such a legalization will make India a haven for sex tourism and will only exploit the innocent women and girls more rather than to empower them. Also, legalization would grossly violate the UDHR and Article 6 of UN CEDAW. Legalization of prostitution will increase child prostitution. For example, Netherlands. Netherlands legalized prostitution in the 1990s and then saw 300% increase in child prostitution. Women in systems of prostitution themselves don't want the sex industry legalized. In a 5-country study on sex trafficking, most of the trafficked and prostituted women interviewed in the Philippines and the United States stated their opinion that prostitution should not be legalized and considered legitimate work, warning that legalization would create more risks and harm for women from already violent customers and pimps. One woman said, "No way, it's not a profession. It's humiliating." And violence from men's side. Not one woman that they interviewed wanted her children, family, or friends to have to earn money by entering the sex industry. Further, it was noted by the landmark judgment of the US Supreme Court that there exists no constitutional rights to engage in illegal employment, namely prostitution. Hence, prostitution must not be legalized since it will lead to more human trafficking, more prostitution, more child prostitution, and hence I rest my case.
Thank you, speakers, for this wonderful debate. It was great hearing your thoughts. Even your speeches were so powerful and enthusiastic that we, as an audience, also tend to believe that like we really want to is this particular thing to be legalized or not. I'm sure our jury is also very excited for hearing your thoughts. By this, I wanted to open the rebut round, for which I want to invite 205 member from 205 to present the rebut question.
Right. Thank you so much, my learned opposition, for your immaculate presentation on the proposition at hand. So my basic question is that how does the learned opposition justifies the defiance of right to occupation and trade enshrined under Article 19, subclause G of the Constitution? Further, if such a legalization is allowed, it is imperative to remember that the industry is worth 20,000 crores, which can be taxed, and this revenue can be used by the government for betterment of victims of forced sex trade only by developing a holistic mechanism where they can get integrated into society. So isn't it beneficial to rather go with legalization as well, as it will improve the current situation and also not violate the constitution as well?
Thank you for the wonderful. Yes, you may.
See, first of all, if we go into the basic definition of what profession means, it includes skill. And for your kind information, prostitution is not as same as service industry, which is paid for a skill. Being human, being a woman, being a LGBT person is not a skill. So how can you say that it can be considered under Article 19G of the considering profession? Secondly, legalization will not help any of the victims. If you are considering any fault in the law present right now, be it CETA, Immoral Trafficking Act, you can go for repealing it and decriminalizing it. Legalization will actually go against what the government actually want. Also, legalization will only make the brothel more powerful, the traffickers more powerful, but the victim will remain unsafe, and will go never to the police or be it any agency for them. Thank you.
Thank you for answering that wonderful question wonderfully. Now I would like to invite the team member from 206 to have the rebuttal question.
So my basic question for my worthy opponent is that they have mentioned in the speech that the legalization will reduce the rape cases. So first of all, sex crime is not on the basis of we think as sexual frustration. It is the mentality, and legalization cannot change the mentality of anybody. That the mentality is flawed, and it is a major societal issue. Also, you are saying that it will reduce rape, but first of all, raping a prostitute is also a rape. Most of the workers indulging in this prostitution act have no choice of whom they are coupled with. How will legalization ensure these sexual crime against the prostitute? These women will not get any right for them.
If I may, the Honorable Supreme Court has recognized in various landmark judgments that sex is an essential, fundamental, important phenomena of human lives. Further, the court has also noted in the judgment of Tukaram of the state of Maharashtra, which functions as a landmark judgment on the whole case of rape, that sexual frustration is a very important element that happens in the acts of rape. So, therefore, sexual frustration is a part of rape. My other argument is that if the process of sex work is legalized, it will give rise to voluntary enter into profession as well. The change as seen in Netherlands and Germany is that there has been an increase of 150% members of the sex working community are now voluntary entering. There has been an increase in 150%. So the increase of voluntary induction into the workforce will lead to a situation where the rape instances are decreased. I in no way vouch for forced or coerced entry into the sector. Rather, the voluntary sector will lead to decreasing the amounts of rape in the society.
Thank you for answering that question wonderfully and having this round very incredibly. It was, again, I am repeating myself, but it was great having such huge thoughts from your sides. Okay, so by this, I think we are over for the finals round. Utkarsh, if you may help me, that
Yeah, if jury would like to ask any question.
Yes, please. What kind of
question to whom? And yeah,
question to speaker 1? Wow 205. I'm audible, sir?
Ji Sanjay ji.
What kind of an ideal legislation do you expect in the context of India?
Thank you so much for your wonderful question, honorable respected jury member. So when I talk about what kind of legislation I hope to be present in India, it is similar to that of the Nordic model. There exist 3 different models when it comes to legalization of the sex practice. Out of this, the Nordic model, which is prevalent in Scandinavian countries, is the best and most optimum model, which has even been appreciated by the international.
Kindly be specific.
Sure. I'll explain more. So in that, which has been even appreciated by the International Court of Justice. So the Nordic model talks about sex being an essential element of human life. Therefore, to provide such facilities to people who are not getting this by themselves, they have first legalized the trade. By legalizing as well, they have curtailed the whole trade of sex under the regulations. They have brought in various regulations, such as to get a brothel licensed, you need various medical compliances. First, that there must be utmost upholding of safe sex. Second, the hygiene standards must be maintained. Third, there must be a certain distance between 2 different rooms in which sexual work is practiced. So these lead to better working domains for sex workers, thereby improving their medical conditions. Second is that they have developed a robust mechanism wherein sex workers get equal access to justice and equal access to social facilities as well. Like we have seen in the current world, there has been a call for inclusion of the LGBTQ in the community, be it the judgment of the NAS Foundation or the Nafte Johar judgment. A similar understanding and development is seen in the Nordic countries with respect to sex workers. Rather than being seen as second-degree citizens, they are being seen as par citizens, and there exists no distinction that this is a person and this is a sex worker, because at the end of the day, all of us are citizens and humans.
What kind of loopholes do you expect in your suggestion of legislation?
Right. So loopholes, I think that can be in my suggestion. First is that, again, there has to be clear definition. There have to be clear set standards. As of now, in the Nordic model, there is no set standard who can enter the trade of prostitution. That is the first requirement which is necessary. Second thing is that, considering the social stigma and strata of India, therein any person above the age of 18 can enter the profession of prostitution. However, considering the recent increase in the marriage age as well, which has been proposed in the parliament, it is necessary to consider the cognitive and the mental development of Indian women and society as well. Keeping that in mind, I think keeping the age at 21 to enter the profession of sexual work would be a better application rather than keeping the work of 18 in India. Third thing is, it will require an extensive application by the executives. There has to be ad campaigns, there have to be sensitization campaigns, which has to be run in parallel to change the outlook of the society. There's a very beautiful ad which goes on in movie theaters and even on the television as well, in which Akshay Kumar talks about the importance of sanitary pads. A study highlighted that before this ad ran, there was approximately 48% of women living in rural countries who were ashamed or shut down for asking sanitary pads. However, after running for that, the number has decreased to 32% in rural areas. Such a similar ad and awareness campaigns is necessary. This was not done in the Nordic model because of the social and geological cultures available over here. However, education, information, awareness needs to be the three pillar models which India specifically needs to adopt.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
May I ask a question from the other team?
Yes, sir, please.
Right. 206, second speaker.
Yes, sir.
Yes. Don't you think that under a legalized system rather than an illegal system, the government has more control over the matter? For example, under illegal prostitution, a sex worker who has been raped, she won't have grounds to come to a police station and ask for to lodge a complaint because she herself is a part of an illegal system. But if it is legal, she has the grounds to come to a police station and lodge a complaint. And the government can keep track on the records, and the government has somewhat of a control when it is legalized. What do you think?
So first of all, I think that in a country like India, we will never allow a straight run brothel. And secondly, I think that there is an incident where two prostitutes were talking to each other, and they were like, one of the client harassed the one prostitute. And when they argue that they will go to police against the client said, do you think that police will help you? And it is a very nature that even though it will be legalized, the prostitute will never go to the police because they think that it will also be unsafe for them to go to the police. Also, there is no trust between the government and the prostitute. So first of all, the need is there has to be maintained a trust between the government and the prostitute that yes, government will protect them. Another thing is, so there is a lack of education between the people of this country and the prostitute. They consider it to be very a taboo in the country, and they will never accept a brothel or any prostitute living in the neighborhood. So legalization will never remove the taboo from them. That's all.
Right. Okay, thank you. That's it from me.
Thank you, jury members, for the wonderful questions and answer from the participants. Now we would like to, close the round. The final has been done. Everything has been done. We'll be meeting again at 5 p.m. for the valedictory round.
Yeah, but before we, end this session, any suggestions, any, from the jury members? Rajesh ji is also here. Anything you would like to say these participants? Because, further we will be just announcing the results and there will be a valid.
I would like to make a general comment that I sort of like, I saw y'all speaking yesterday, all four of y'all, and I was like, I had the fear of having to judge between the four of y'all, like between the two teams in the finals. Like, to be very honest, I was like, wow, these two teams are good. They will end up in the final. I'm going to be in so much trouble when I have to judge, right? So yes, it finally happened. It was very difficult for me to pick between one of the two teams, right? Now I've been adjudicating and judging in so many debating tournaments, rounds, moods, and like I adjudicate a lot in Sri Lanka. Now currently I do in India as well. What I want you all to know is that today one of your teams will win the final, other one might not. But I want you all to know all four of you all are equally talented, so much potential, right? So today's win or loss would not define who you are. So I want you all to go forward, pursue your career, and hoping to see you all in other tournaments. Just go and show your colors just like you did today.
Thank you, sir.
Rishi sir.
Ji, Sanjay ji.
Rajesh is speaking.